Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this mono-blue Merfolk deck with Namor at the helm. But before we dive into the deck tech, a quick announcement. As you may have noticed, there have been some recent bans in Brawl, mostly blue cards here, as we see that Force of Will, Subtlety, Wash Away, as well as Uggin's Labyrinth, Time Warp, and Temporal Manipulation have now been banned from the format. You can still play them in competitive Brawl, but they will no longer be available in the regular Brawl queue. And that certainly affected this deck, since I had 4 of these cards in the deck before, with Force of Will, Wash Away, and the 2 extra turn cards, which also have great synergy with Namor, but I had to replace them and the deck still seems fine without them. So then now if we take a look at our commander, Namor is a 3-mana creature with power equal to the number of Merfolk you control, 4 toughness, also has built-in evasion with flying, and then whenever we cast a non-creature spell with 1 or more blue mana symbols in its mana cost, we get to create that many 1/1 blue Merfolk creature tokens. So Namor is best friends with free counter spells like Force of Negation, rest in peace Force of Will, no longer with us in regular Brawl, but we still have plenty of other powerful counter spells that can synergize with Namor, and then of course it's also great in any Merfolk deck where you'll have lots of Merfolk naturally to increase its power, and then lots of Lords to pump up those Merfolk tokens as well. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories, starting with our mana acceleration. Don't want too many of these, since they do not have any blue mana symbols outside of maybe a Midnight Clock which you could play, so they are not going to make any Merfolk tokens with Namor, but some of these can still pump up your team, like the Heraldic Banner and Patchwork Banner, so they still seem worth including. And then our next category are the Merfolk, and I've sorted these according to mana cost, so we've got a bunch of 1-drops, even more 2-drops, and then a couple 3+ mana Merfolk. Of course, we're often going to want to cast Namor on turn 3, so we usually want to avoid having too many other 3-mana creatures, but some of them are just too powerful to ignore. And then we move on to our counter spells, which are often the spells with lots of blue mana symbols to make Merfolk tokens with, as well as being useful at protecting our board and interacting with the opponent's game plan. And then especially free counter spells like Flare of Denial and Force of Negation can be very effective, as they can generate Merfolk tokens without needing to invest any additional mana into making them. And then we've got some additional card draw effects. Some of our Merfolk already draw some cards, but here we've got some cheap cantrips to make more tokens with Namor and to improve our hand, as well as some nice card draw engines like the Bindant of Thassa and Kindred Discovery especially can also go off if we have a Namor in play. And then our miscellaneous section has a few more removal spells, especially the Summon Leviathan can be a very nice one-sided board wipe, leaving all your Merfolk in play. This is also where I had the extra turn cards before, and you could still run some of the more expensive ones, but of course at 5 mana, Temporal Manipulation and Time Warp were the most appealing options, especially since you could also maybe return them with a Mystic Sanctuary in our mana base. But yeah, that's the quick breakdown. Now for the deep dive, pun intended, starting with our mana artifacts. Springleaf Drum is great with any deck making lots of cheap creatures, so they can also tap for mana. We've got Arcane Signet, and then Sapphire Medallion, also very nice, discounting our blue spells by 1. The Water Skin is also great, as we'll be able to use the extra mana in the opponent's turn, while still making an extra mana in our own as well. And then the 2 banners, pumping up our Merfolk as well to get in for more damage. Then at 1 mana, we mostly have evasive Merfolk, ones that are unblockable like Shorestalker and Mistcloaked Heralds, and then we also have the Windrobber as just a 1/1 flyer. And then the Mistcaller can have some useful abilities against Reanimator decks or green decks, putting creatures into play with our Green Sun Zenith. Then we've got Mindspring Merfolk, which can later also put +1 counters on the team and draw some extra cards, can even keep up its ability alongside our counter spells. And then the Harmonized Trio can also maybe set up multiple Brainstorms, also part of why we have some fetch lands in the mana base to shuffle away unwanted cards that we brainstormed on top. Then at 2 mana, we've got multiple Lords, including the new Lord of Atlantis, finally on Arena. This is the original Merfolk Lord. Do keep in mind that this effect is symmetrical, so it will also affect the opponent's Merfolk, giving them a +1/+1 and Island Walk, but there's not too many Merfolk seeing play, so it's mostly going to affect your own creatures. And then of course the new and improved version, which is the Master of the Pearl Trident, which only affects your own Merfolk creatures. Then we have some interaction as well with a Merfolk Trickster, and at 2 mana the Floodpit's Drowner can also tap creatures down, put a stun counter on them, so we often want to use these in the opponent's upkeep to maybe tap down a Mana Elf. Then the Daughter of the Deep is pretty nice with all the cantrips, as it can also generate additional Merfolk tokens if we drew a second card. Cutthroat is great with all our counter spells, as we can flash it in and then put additional +1 counters on it when playing cards in the opponent's turn. We've got the 2 Silvergill Merfolk, the Adept drawing a card, and the Mentor making a 1/1 token to help us go wide. Then the Hexcatcher, another Lord, can also be used to counter non-creature spells by sacrificing a Merfolk and making the opponent pay 1 mana. And then the Harbinger can also bounce tapped creatures back to the opponent's hand, so offers a bit more interaction there as well. And then at 3 mana, we've got another Lord with a Marrow Reachery, can also tap or untap permanents when casting Merfolk spells, Tidebinder to counter activated and triggered abilities. Harbinger can be very effective against multicolor mana bases, turning them all into islands, and it also turns on Island Walk on Lord of Atlantis and Master of the Pearl Trident. Svelin of Sea and Sky can also draw extra cards and protect the rest of our team. We've got Champions of the Shoal to put stun counters on opposing creatures. And then Atsuma bumps up our team, can also draw extra cards. Seafloor Oracle can also draw multiple cards if we hit the opponent. And then we've got Roaming Throne to maybe double some of our Merfolk triggers, including Namor making extra tokens. And then Orisa can often be played for just 2 mana as a 2/2 that will draw 2 cards when it enters. Then we move on to our counter spells, where at 1 mana I'm also trying Force Spike. Usually not the biggest fan of this, but it does have its moments. Spell Pierce, better at countering non-creature spells. Spell Snare can usually find a target, countering an opposing 2-drop. Daze is one of the few free counter spells that are left, can pick up an island to help cast it, and then counter unless the opponent pays 1. Mana Leak is a classic for good reason, counter unless they pay 3. Negate for non-creature spells. Got a Remand, which is also quite flexible, can even remand our own spells that are on the stack if they're maybe getting countered by an opposing spell and still draw a card. Just a nice tempo play. And then we've got the classic counter spell, that one's still available. We've got a Long River's Pull, which is good for creatures, can also counter non-creatures if we gift an extra card. Flare of Denial can still be cast for free if we sacrifice a non-token blue creature, so at its best with some of our cheaper Merfolk. And then Force of Negation is the most exciting one alongside Namor, since we can cast it for free in the opponent's turn to counter a non-creature spell if we pitch a blue card from our hand. And then the Charm has lots of modes, including draw 2, but also just counter a spell or maybe even steal a 1 mana permanent. And then Cryptic Command also has tons of modes and can also generate 3 Merfolk tokens with Namor in play. And then our cantrips include Brainstorm and Ponder, which are more reasons to include some fetch lands in the mana base to shuffle away unwanted cards. We've got Consider, Opt, and Peek, all at instant speed, as well as Preordain and Sleight of Hand for some more card selection. Spreading Seas is pretty nice with our Island Walk Lords, since they can turn an opposing land into an island, maybe even mana screw the opponent in the process. And then Bident of Thassa, another powerful card draw engine, also making 2 Merfolk tokens with Namor in play. And then the Kindred Discovery is awesome. Whenever a Merfolk enters or attacks, we get to draw a card, so that also triggers off our Merfolk tokens. And then our miscellaneous section has some more interaction into the Floodmaw as a cheap bounce spell. Hybridization could also play Pongify to destroy an opposing creature, turn it into a 3/3 token. We've got Witness Protection, can also maybe shut down a creature commander, make it lose all its abilities. The Pilgrimage can also help us go wide by making hexproof Merfolk tokens, especially powerful with some of our evasive 1-drops, which can easily tap to keep making more tokens. And then Summon Leviathan can be a powerful one-sided board wipe, returning all creatures that aren't Krakens, Leviathans, Merfolk, Octopus, or Serpents back to hand. And then Chapters 2 and 3 can also provide more value. And then our mana base also has some nice payoffs, such as 3/3 City, rewarding us for going wide. Nykthos is pretty similar, looking at our devotion to blue. And then Cavern of Souls can make our Merfolk uncounterable. Odawara offers a bit more interaction. And Mutavault can turn into a creature with all types, including Merfolk. And then we've got plenty of blue fetch lands to also search up our one-off Mystic Sanctuary, which can maybe put an instant or sorcery from our graveyard back on top of the deck. Used to be more exciting when we had Time Warp to put back on top, but it can still be nice to get back one of our counter spells if we need them. And then plenty of basic islands with some very nice art to go with our Merfolk deck. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Muldrotha, so a graveyard deck. My hand is functional, not particularly exciting. Turn 1 Heralds. Turn 2, currently don't have anything lined up. And Marauder is going to make me sack the Herald. Alright, can probably hang on to the Sanctuary. My hand is a little clogged with 3-drops. Supplier resolves, milling some cards. So ideally we find a counterspell for their commander so they can get it in play. For now, Waterskin still leaves up hybridization. And then next turn I can maybe play multiple spells. Yeah, if I just play Namor, there's a decent chance it gets removed without doing anything. Okay, Nissa's a scary one. Can maybe hybridize it if her opponent's about to run out of fetch land, just a command tower. And a Metamorph. Okay, maybe copying my Waterskin could be possible. Yep. So then I'm keeping the hybridization for Muldrotha. Roaming through is also interesting. So I can hang on to the Sanctuary for now. And then Banner into Namor could work. And then I'll still have hybridization in the opponent's turn thanks to the Waterskin. Okay, there's Muldrotha. Opponent can get some immediate value out of the graveyard. So I'll wait for them to fetch with a Vista. Although I guess it doesn't matter, because we're answering Muldrotha and not Nissa. So they will get an Alpha Elemental here. And it's not going to be difficult for them to replay Muldrotha next turn. They found a Deceit. Although they don't have the correct mana to really cast it. Bauble takes out our token. That's fine. Okay, a Brainstorm. Although now I regret having used my fetch lands already, was saving the Sanctuary. So I can start with a Brainstorm, or I can go Roaming Throne into, let's see, Reachery whenever we cast a Merfolk spell, but on the stack, Roaming Throne is not a Merfolk. Can also Brainstorm in the opponent's turn, to be fair, thanks to the Waterskin making mana. So we'll name Merfolk. Play Reachery. And decline on the hybridization, or do I? I guess it's not terrible to be able to answer Muldrotha again. Sure. And then still gonna play the Reachery now, I think. Attack for 5. And then we get to, at the very least, Brainstorm, making a bunch of Merfolk tokens. Opponent's gonna cast Deceit with all modes. So they're bouncing Roaming Throne, they'll have to pay the ward. And then I can let the bounce trigger resolve to then hide Roaming Throne from Deceit, making me discard it. Or I can Brainstorm now just to get more Merfolk tokens, but I guess hiding the Roaming Throne is more valuable. So we'll let this resolve. And then now Brainstorm. See what else we get. 2 lands, so I can put back Roaming Throne and hybridization, drawing the Roaming Throne first. So now the Deceit doesn't do anything. Although we also drew 2 islands, so that's the drawback. And do I trade for the Frog Lizard? Would also shrink down Namor. But yeah, I guess the damage is gonna add up over time. In case they answer the Roaming Throne once again. So our opponent knows our hands, so no surprises here. Could have used some more card draw engines to really string together more cards. And yeah, as we see here, casting Roaming Throne does not trigger the Regery. So our opponent's at 9, but they now get to play Muldrotha with another fetch land to trigger Nissa twice. And then they could play the Accursed Marauder at the very least. So then I have to decide what to get rid of. Opponent with Leovold as well. That's another option now. Still goes for Marauder. I think I keep Namor and Roaming Throne. Although tapping down a birds could be a play we make. I guess I could also let go of Namor and then easily recast it. Just means giving up on an attack when our opponent's at 8, but I guess the birds can also chump. So I really just need to top deck something useful here, otherwise Muldrotha is just going to bury us. And the Elk can also shut down something. And they still have the mana from birds to bestow this. So I guess that's going after the Regery, because Roaming Throne has ward. Alright, so I don't get to tap anything down. Just play Namor and hybridize Muldrotha once again. And no attacks. Muldrotha is back. And once again with a Prismatic Vista. At least they can't replay the Elk. And Marauder's in play. And they found a Twilight Diviner. So as it stands, they don't seem to have an immediate answer to Namor, so that could still maybe fly over for the win. Just need to draw a decent spell here. Any spell with a blue pip could do it. And a Master of the Pearl Trident. Opponent does have islands, so that'll be good enough. Giving us Island Walk. Alright, so very close one here against Muldrotha, managing to keep it at bay just enough. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing Hei Bai, so 5-color Shrines. What do we think of our hand? I would much rather find a counterspell for their commander. Negate can still, of course, counter an actual shrine. So this one's a bit on the weak side. Although maybe on the play going Mindspring into Pilgrimage is good enough. Just to start making some extra Merfolk. Alright, so just need a third land now. Can always ponder to try and find one. Opponents with an Arcane Signet, so next turn they can already play their commander. Peak could also have a look. But yeah, let's ponder to make a land more likely. Yeah, Cryptic Command is going to be tricky to cast, but I guess the banner gets us to 4 mana. So no shuffle. Although sadly don't have counterspell in hand right now. But we can keep up appearances and then still fire off a peak. Small chance they play something we can negate instead. Alright, draw it, so they're not going for Hei Bai just yet. That will stop our Mindspring beatdown. And a Talisman. Could negate it, it's not disastrous. So tempted to let that one slide. Have a look with Peak. And Tear Asunder, Sanctum. Alright. So they're hoping that Hei Bai finds some goodies. Because they're kind of out of card draw at the moment. They can, of course, tear asunder Namor if I play it, or the Banner, or even the Pilgrimage. So, yeah, ideally I would have been able to play Banner and keep up Negate. I don't think I just want to keep up Counterspell. I'm fine with Hei Bai resolving. And then, yeah, hopefully they don't hit a powerful Shrine. So, yeah, I'll still get the Banner in play. And naming Merfolk. And then if they feel inclined to tear asunder, that's fine. Once we exhaust Mind Spring, we also get an extra token. Alright, opponent hit one of the better ones here, the Seeing Winds. Can always try and bounce it with the Cryptic Command. Opponent with the Birds of Paradise. So they're hanging on to tear asunder. Okay. So could try Namor keep up Counterspell and Negate, which seems reasonable. And then maybe next turn Cryptic Command bounce Honden, making a bunch of Merfolk in the process. Make sure to tap the Banner in case they tear asunder it, so we can still keep up our counterspells. With only one Shrine in play, it's not a disaster if they keep it around for a turn. And I could also exhaust at instant speed. Not drawing any cards, but still making a token and getting a bunch of extra +1 counters. So we'll see what happens next. I think if they tear asunder the Pilgrimage, I would let it happen, but yeah, I can negate here. Still an argument for using Counterspell, since we would get 2 Merfolk tokens out of it. But this will be a bit more flexible. So now I'm down to Cryptic Command bounce the blue Honden. And then if I bounce draw, I could maybe still draw a land for Counterspell. Tapping all creatures, honestly, also worth considering, but let's still draw. No land, sadly, but yeah, Namor still hits pretty hard. And then next turn we can maybe exhaust and go for an all-out attack. Don't think Force Spike is going to do any favors here. Unable to Scream. I'm just going to Force Spike to get 1 extra token out of it. And then with the Mind Spring we could still have enough. Yeah, looks like it. Could keep up Counterspell or play Roaming Throne or just sink more mana into drawing cards, doesn't really matter, because our opponent's dead. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Captain Howler, blue-red discard. What do we think of our hands? Yeah, it's reasonable. Do need to build up a board before we can draw 2 on the cheap with Orisa. But the Regery can help with that as well. And hopefully Namor can stick the landing. Opponent with a Beastbinder. That's actually pretty annoying since it can shut down my commander. So I will fire off my counterspell. And then Namor has the highest upside if it can stick around here. Although going for Regery first is also reasonable, because then it's easier to double spell on the subsequent turn. But yeah, now we've got Harbinger, can also flash it in, although I don't expect any tapped creatures. So still going for Regery first. Can maybe pump up Namor. Opponent's gonna Memory Lapse it. Could go for a Kindred Discovery first. Definitely sets up a lot of card draw. And it's gonna be an Inti first. Opponent may be afraid of a 1-mana counterspell. The Scions can also draw discard.
I will learn what nobody yet knows.
Luckily, we don't have to attack our opponent, just whenever we attack we get to draw, so I can still go after their Planeswalker if I'd like. Is that the move? Or I can go for Regery, but then at most I can play Harbinger and there's nothing to bounce. So then I think I prefer the Kindred Discovery here. We'll make 2 Merfolk tokens. And get to draw a bunch. And Abidant is more card draw. But yeah, assuming Inti attacks, next turn we can go Regery plus Harbinger. Scions get to loot, triggering Captain Howler's ability, giving a creature 2 extra power. Not super interested in trading, should we get the chance, but yeah, now a Fear with Delirium enabled, so that's pretty scary. A bunch of cards in exile. Yeah, opponent's going for it. Inti for an extra counter and trample, so no point in blocking. Opponent is actually empty-handed here. But now they get to draw. So back up to 3 cards in hand. Okay, so I can start by casting Harbinger just for 2 mana, bouncing Inti. Or I can first go for Regery. Let's go with Harbinger first. Bounce Inti, draw off Kindred Discovery. Okay. And then I can still tap 3/3 City. And then how about, let's see, Regery. Does this get us to 10 toughness or greater? It should. So then I can cast this for 2 mana. Could also play the Medallion first and still cast everything, I believe. Let's see, 2 mana for Medallion, 2 mana for Regery, and then 1 mana for Orisa. And then I can still tap or untap something. Should have maybe done this second main in order to untap Namor. Now, I don't think it really matters. Can just untap an island. Can still maybe draw something I can cast, like a Mistcloaked Herald, of course. Okay, so now I will first attack. And draw another card. Yeah, the Discovery is going off. And then Heralds can untap Namor, since I'm not doing anything else. Alright, if I had untapped a land, I guess we get to Preordain again. But now the 3/3 City is going to make a lot of mana for us. Namor shut down, but I can still maybe chump with it to get it back in the command zone. But yeah, we do have to be careful here with 2 attack steps and additional power and trample. Our opponent can threaten a lot of damage. Opponent with a Mishra's Command. Taking out our unblockable Heralds. Or not quite yet. Maybe they've got an answer to the Regery. And Broadside Barrage. And that's a big attack. Okay, so currently I could try and double block Captain Howler. Although, assuming they have an answer to the Regery, my creatures would also shrink back down. So we'll have to keep that in mind. So I guess blocking here is free, assuming the Regery dies. Because I would lose the Heralds anyways. So right now I only have 2 power on Captain Howler. I mean, let's see. Yeah, I guess I could double block like so. Or it's better to keep going wide for 3/3 City. Then there's no point in Namor blocking there anymore. So yeah, even if they answer the Regery, I would still trade for Captain Howler as it stands. Question is what to do with a Mistcloaked. If I double block Fear, maybe I do. Or maybe I don't. I mean, I'm expecting them to take out the Regery. Maybe they don't actually have anything. Alright, they do. So, I expected that to happen, but we still trade for Howler. And then the Fear is not too threatening, and our opponent scoops it up. Alright, so they were counting on me making a mistake here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Miss Marvel. So a 1/4 Vigilance Reach, no max hand size. They're gonna target their own creatures, and then grow Miss Marvel that way. Okay, our hand seems decent, especially with a Master of the Pearl Trident against the blue deck. Opponent starts with a Ponder. Will need to draw 1 or 2 lands myself, but I've got a few plays I can make in the meantime. So far so good. If they tap out, it might be fine to just resolve Master while I can. Harder for a blue deck to answer a creature once it's in play. Also not impossible, there are some enchantments that can remove its abilities, for instance. If our opponent passes with mana up, I'll do the same. Picked up a Force of Negation, which will come in handy. Miss Marvel isn't the biggest problem. Can also maybe shut it down with the Tidebinder. Stock up, feels fine to counterspell, just use up my mana. And then I could try Namor, hope they don't have like a Daze. That works. And now we've got Force of Negation to protect them. And Miss Marvel resolves. And a Preordain is fine as well. So yeah, next turn the coast is clear for Master of the Pearl Tridents. Could also play the Champions. Opponent might have some 1-mana instants that can target Miss Marvel. Summon Leviathan can also bounce a bunch of stuff. Although I'm pretty far from casting it, so I might pitch it to the Force of Negation. So yeah, it's basically Champions versus Master. Yeah, I guess Champions is reasonable. Hits a bit harder. Uses up more mana. If I draw land, I could still Force of Negation in my own turn alongside playing Master to maybe counter a counterspell. Force Spike is interesting. Probably won't be enough to protect my Master if they have their own counterspell, let's say. But yeah, I guess we'll attack. Opponent's got a Magic Damper to not only untap Miss Marvel, but also grow it with its ability. And that's before the stun counter happens, and then it would also gain hexproof to protect it. Yeah, that's quite a combination. So I kind of have to Force of Negation here, or else what happens? They would give this +1/+1, and then base power equal to the number of cards, so that would be 4. So that could set up an ambush. Alright, don't love this, but gotta try. And then now they might have a counterspell. 3 steps, and I'm 1 short of getting it with a Force Spike. Although if I Force Spike... yeah, I guess our opponent's already down to 3 cards in hand. So then it would go up to 4 power. So I'm about to get 2 extra tokens. So Miss Marvel would still just trade for Namor, which I guess is fine. So it's not a complete blowout anymore. Alright, that was an exciting turn. all from just a magic damper. So we never got to stun Miss Marvel with the champions. Sanctuary can maybe get something back. So yeah, had I gone for Master, our opponent did have the 3 steps to counter it. And now a Curious Obsession. That's fine. Yeah, I guess Marvel's ability also draws a card when you target it. There's a lot of text. I think I'm fine jumping, so they don't draw another card. They do have the magic damper back in hand, however, so attacking into Miss Marvel could be tricky, if they have a counterspell for Master, that is. A Mistcaller, unlikely to really matter, but can play it. They did have to think about it for a second, so yeah, it doesn't feel like this Master of the Pearl Trident is gonna resolve. But waiting is probably not gonna improve matters too much. I'll give it a shot. And that actually resolves. Of course, they could still have like a bounce spell to send it packing. But it's gotta be worth a try. Magic damper happens. And they did have a blink, but the Force Spike is actually gonna save the day. Wow. Alright. That looks pretty lethal to me. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Quandrix the Proof. Trying to take some extra turns. At the time of recording, we already got the announcement that Time Warp and Temporal Manipulation are going to be banned, but our opponent could still have them in the deck. So this hand is missing a 3rd land, but I don't mind it. Got our Force of Negation, Opt can maybe hit a land drop. And as long as Namor resolves, we can use our counter spells to make some Merfolk tokens to take over the board. If my opponent counters Namor, I could be in trouble. Now, a Mistcaller can be decent against Cascade. Or never mind, I guess with Cascade you're still casting the card. So I don't know if Mistcaller is going to be particularly useful. Maybe if they have some tutor effect in green, we can shut that down. And yes, since we have the Sanctuary in play, the only reason to save Flooded Strand is if we draw like a Brainstorm or Ponder. The library is going to be a problem, so now it's on me to apply pressure, but since my hand is pretty reactive, that may not work out. Otherwise our opponent can just take over the late game by drawing an extra card each turn. Cutthroat is tempting, since it pairs well with my counter spells, but I really just need to find a land here. Alright, and Banner is also an option. Banner keep up Spell Pierce, but I think Namor still has a bit more upside here. And then if we pass a turn, we'll have Force of Negation up. And do I counter a ramp spell is the question. Maybe I do, just to apply as much pressure as possible. Fanatic I wouldn't be able to counter. Alright, I guess I'm down to play the Banner now. So we do have a relatively fast clock once we deploy some of our counter spells. If I can successfully spell pierce something, it may still be worth it over using the force, even though I get one fewer token. Okay, opponent actually casting the Bloomvine Regent. That gets around my current counter spells, and that also blocks Namor. I can of course bounce with Cryptic Command, but I wouldn't be able to counter it on the way down. So it's not incredibly effective, but it does also force them to replay it when Fnatic would otherwise make 4 mana. So I think bounce draw is still worth it overall. And then I can hang on to the fetch lands on the off chance that I draw like a Brainstorm or Ponder next turn. So yeah, I'm mana short of countering with a Charm, but maybe I can go wide enough. Possible they change up their play, goes for Quandrix, cascading into a Birds of Paradise. Would have preferred a non-creature spell here. Can steal the birds with a charm, not sure how relevant that is. Opponent now discarding to hand size. And that's another land. So what are my options? Can just charm to draw 2 now, see what I get. Versus attack, maybe offer the trade for Quandrix with Namor. We might draw into an Island Walk Merfolk and then we can just win the game here. Alright, that's not bad. So then I can still play the Mentor. Be holding a Merfolk in play. And then I don't hate the all-out attack. Opponent has to either chump or trade. They're gonna chump, keeping Quandrix alive. Falls to 8. But we have a long reverse pull, force and spell pierce available. And yeah, part to Water Veil with Cascade. So first see what they try to cascade into. A Force of Will, that's not the best combo with Cascade. So then now I could spell pierce, make them pay for it, so they're fully tapped out, and then still Force of Negation. I kind of like that sequence. I guess I could tap the library and the Boseiju and still have some blue counterspell up, but a 1 mana blue counterspell would be pretty awful to cascade into. So I don't necessarily expect it. And now we've got maximum tokens. And our opponent seems pretty dead on the way back. Alright, and that did it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Brigid, so green-white tokens. Our hand's got some counter spells, Cutthroat we can play at instant speed. So, could work out. That's when our opponent plays a turn 1 Delighted Halfling. Alright, not quite. Figure of Fable, another Kithkin. So we can pass with Cutthroat available. Pilgrim resolves. Figure is pretty good against a handful of counterspells, since they can just spend their mana upgrading it, although that also plays into our Charm, which can just steal it at some point. The Water Skin is going to be better next turn. So the question here is, do I tap out for Namor, or do I keep up all my counterspells? Should probably keep up my interaction, because if our opponent plays Brigid, I'm just going to be far behind. I'm fine trading Cutthroat for Pilgrim. Alright, opponent accepts. Am I more willing to play Namor now? No, let's still be patient. They could be sandbagging a white source. Alright. So opponent going for the play around your counterspell plan. Walks right into our steal your 1-drop plan. So Water Skin pass with a 2-mana counterspell up, and our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Storm, Force of Nature. Okay, so what do we think of our hand? Flare of Denial, I can sack the Mistcaller in order to cast it. Still feels like it's lacking a little bit of action. Okay, this is decent, assuming we find some cheap creatures to go with Abidant, or if Namor can stick around. Signet's not bad. So then we can maybe play a turn 3 Namor with a hybridization available. And let's already play Mutavault so we have that option available next turn. Although I doubt it's going to come up. Opponent passing with 3 mana up. Possible they have their own counterspell. But yeah, I think I'm down to play Namor with Force Spike and hybridization available. So far so good. Would love for them to tap out for Storm and be able to Force Spike it. Opponent's got an Abrade. Okay, so they must have another burn spell. In which we can now Force Spike, making a token in the process. And then next turn I could still go Biden plus hybridization on Storm before it goes off. So this names Merfolk. So let's see, I can hybridization. Does the 3/3 city make any extra mana yet? Not quite. They actually have a force. Okay, so I still have both my counter spells available. Can use 3/3 city to actually filter enough blue mana to cast both. And then Remand could hit my own hybridization to send it back to hand. Or I can just Remand the force. If our opponent does have another blue card to replay it, I can just counter with Long Reverse Pull, make a whole bunch of tokens, which perfectly sets up our Bident to take over. So yeah, we would have been in a commanding position. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Eluge, so a mono-blue deck, can expect lots of counter spells. Do not have a Cavern of Souls, but we do have a turn 1 Windrobber with turn 2 Pilgrimage to maybe get some tokens going. So it could be worth a try. Opponent with a Mox Amber as well. So yeah, besides Cavern of Souls, what else do we want to draw? I guess just a third land to deploy some of our 3-drops. But I'm mainly hoping that this Pilgrimage can stick the landing. So if our opponent passes with mana up, I mean, we could also go for a Drowner. But not expecting Eluge yet, so still gonna try the Pilgrimage. That actually resolves. But maybe they have an answer to the Windrobber. Alright, we actually get to make a token. Milling them is probably not to my benefit if they have some delve spells. But you never know. Opponent just consulting with 2 lands in play. Not the scariest start. So now is when they would keep up mana for Namor, but now I don't have to play it. Can just pass with other options available, such as our Charm to draw 2, maybe Trickster. So this is what I was sort of hoping for, getting this combo going. And then now our opponent's on the back foot. If they try and cast Eluge, I can also counter it potentially. Blast Zone, okay, could maybe deal with the Windrobber. Opponent plotting what might be Elrond's Epiphany, who knows. In that case, could just play a Trickster. Keep the Drowner for later. So we've got another non-token to enable the Pilgrimage. Currently don't have any intentions to tap out for Regery or Namor. So we'll see what's next. Opponent tries Eluge. We'll try to counter it. That works. And our opponent scoops it up. I'll take it. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Iron Man, Titan of Innovation, so blue-red artifact. And seems reasonable. Cutthroat with a bunch of instants I can pair with it. Maybe starting with Ponder to make sure we keep hitting our land drops. And a Shadow Spear. So I want to keep my instants to go with a Cutthroat. Okay, so I can maybe draw the Force Spike sooner and then Island. Don't mind the negate. So these are all fine. So then I'm gonna pass with all my instants available, ideally resolve the Cutthroat and have it survive. Cursed Mirror. Yeah, that's maybe worth Force Spiking, since that's gonna give them a bunch of mana going forward. So then Force Spike loses effectiveness. But I will keep my other instants in hand. And then now Medallion can still Cutthroat. Or cast some of my 2-mana counter spells. And then Namor can also be played alongside one of our counters. Saheeli would make a pair of Thopter tokens. Yeah, that's probably worth negating. So I wish I had Cutthroat in play already. Now I think it's going to be Namor over Cutthroat. Could of course try to opt into a land, but if I don't find one, I get punished a bit. So we'll play it safe. And now Iron Man we remand. Make a token. And our opponent's already gonna scoop it up, but yeah, next turn we finally get to untap, and then Hexcatcher can counter more non-creature spells. Do not have a perfect answer for Iron Man lined up if they recast it, but we get a few looks at maybe some answers. If not, we can still try and go wide to overwhelm them. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Ojer Kaslem, so a mono-green stompy deck. Our hand's not bad. Got a counterspell for a creature, turn 3 Charm, or can play our God. So mostly worried about cards that make spells uncounterable. Medallion I can actually Spell Pierce, so that lines up nicely. Springleaf can wait. And Gwenna I'm also happy to counter. So they don't necessarily have the mana for their commander next turn, so I think we get one of our 3-drops in play. And then I think it might be Namor. Especially if we plan to Charm next turn, I can get 3 tokens out of it. So then now I could still play Springleaf, attack. Keep up Charm. If they don't cast their commander or some 5-drop, then I would have also been willing to maybe just draw 2 cards with it to get the ball rolling. But yeah, now we're super far ahead, making 3 tokens. I can untap, and then either Bident or Seafloor Oracle can draw me a ton of cards, and then we'll likely find more counterspells. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Peter Parker. What do we think of our hand? Spreading Seas could maybe punish a greedy mana base. Of Got Brainstorm plus Fetch Lane, so give it a try. Missing some other Merfolk, but maybe Namor can make them. Force to protect it is also quite nice, as we'll also get 2 Merfolk tokens out of it. So then turn 1, I probably want to opt. So we can shuffle away 2 cards with a Brainstorm. Unless I want to make sure I Spreading Seas on 2, then it may be worth it to just Brainstorm on turn 1 already. And yeah, opponent is fetching, so they've got a 1-drop they want to cast. It's going to be a tapped Hedge Maze. So Spreading Seas to cut off their green mana is a play we can make. Yeah, don't hate it. So we'll Brainstorm now. Would have drawn another fetch land as it turns out. I don't think I need to keep all of the lanes. So I'll shuffle away the second fetch maybe. And this turn, Spreading Seas. Next turn, Namor with Force Backup. So we'll see if Spreading Seas was effective. They also had a Starting Town and now Arcane Signet to make more colors. I don't think I forced this, even though it's tempting. And then really hope they don't have a 1-mana removal spell that they can cast in my turn, because then I won't be able to force it. Opponent untaps. And a Relic of Legends. I will now counter, mostly just to get the tokens out of it. And then ditch the hybridization. Opponent still had an Esper Sentinel. Okay. So if I go for Rejury, I won't quite be able to pull afterwards. So I think we just go for Cutthroat plus pull, but I can wait and see. Our opponent would get to draw off Sentinel. It's going to be a Helga. Yeah, Helga's a pretty good card. So I think I'm down to try and counter it here. Press our tempo advantage. And get 2 tokens, grow the Cutthroat. And then next turn Rejury to pump the team. Opponent says good game and scoops it up, so that worked out. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Galadriel, a blue-green Scry deck. Our hand's got potential, especially the Lord of Atlantis should be effective, giving our team Island Walk. And then a free counterspell doesn't hurt, Silverkill can draw, and then Biden's the perfect follow-up to Namor. There are some infinite Scry combos with Galadriel and some of the other elves. Well, Halfling kind of forces me to daze it here, otherwise they can just make all their legends uncounterable, which is most of the relevant creatures in the deck. So, yeah, kind of time walked ourselves a bit by picking up our island. But that's the power of Delighted Halfling. So now Silvergill. They already have an island in place, so revealing Lord of Atlantis doesn't really have a drawback. Still imagine I want to play Namor first and get some tokens going before we pump up the team. And our opponent does still have their blue mana up, so they could have their own counterspell, but Wash Away just got banned, so that's no longer an option. Stern Scolding, however, is. Yeah, and this one hurts, because Namor is usually quite large, but right now on the stack it still had 2 or less power. So that works. Now Tyvar. So they might also have an elf sub-theme. Do have a fetch line to go with a Ponder at least. And the Trickster could be useful. So, still think we start with Ponder. And then some decent options. Kind of like all of these. Starting with a Mentor. And then we can still Flood Maw if needed. Opponent goes to attackers. And gets in for maybe 6. Reconsiders. Okay, take 3. And the Curator of Destinies cannot be countered. When it enters, and gets some card advantage. Yeah, it's pretty effective. Can still bounce it, but then they'll just replay it and get more value. So, which one am I choosing? Which pile goes into their hand? I guess they can have the negates. Other pile had a Prime Speaker Zegana. Alright, let's just bounce the Curator now. So I could play the Bident while I can, before they can negate it. Or I can just resolve Namor, and then casting Bident, even if it gets countered, still makes 2 tokens. Although I would probably just go for a 2-man next turn. Yeah, Namor is definitely the more mana-efficient option. Does mean shuffling away the champions, but I think that's okay. Yeah, I mean, going for a 2-man is also reasonable. Because maybe I won't get enough value out of Namor with few non-creature spells in hand. So let's actually go for a 2-man. And I can still cast my 1-drop. Just trying to go wide to set up our Lord of Atlantis. Opponent will scry, which also enables Galadriel. And Curator is back with negate backup. We've got a mutation. I don't want to give them... So I don't know what they put in hand, but yeah, mutation would counter our Lord of Atlantis. So... can try and go for it. Could also bait out with Bident of Thassa. Also seems reasonable. If they want to negate this, then Lord of Atlantis resolves. Yep. And then do we have lethal? It's got to be close. Alright, sweet. And in case our opponent didn't have any islands in play, we can Spreading Seas to still enable our Lord of Atlantis. So yeah, we got to see this mono-blue Merfolk deck in action. And yeah, despite the bans, which certainly affected this archetype, the deck still seems plenty powerful. So as long as you can get a quick board established and then back it up with some counter spells, that's usually going to be leading you to a quick victory as well. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.